to another episode of Timber Talks, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of forestry and the innovations transforming the industry. I'm your host, Mindy, and today we have a special guest with us, Dan Staley, principal of Arbor Drone, LLC. Dan has extensive experience in the field, and his company is at the forefront of integrating drone technology into forestry management. Welcome, Dan. So I know drones have just been, everywhere, it seems. So what inspired you to integrate drone technology into forestry management?
How far back do we want to go? In grad school, my advisor is Marina Alberti. She's a land cover change modeler. And back then, I'm old. Back then, all you had was a 256 color grayscale satellite imagery. And so I worked on a project to try and find open planting spaces for trees in Seattle using satellite imagery. And it just got me going from there. My undergraduate degree was in urban forestry, and having the opportunity and the luck to be able to work on these at the time groundbreaking, very powerful computers with some satellite imagery. That's what got me started.
Okay. Can you share some historical milestones in the development of drone technology for forestry? So you went from, I'm assuming you're talking about GIS.
Yeah. So going backwards, the historical milestone really was Ronald Reagan sending a photographer to a factory in Southern California and discovering Marilyn Monroe, who was working on drones at the time. And so her very first images were of her in a factory holding a drone and her working on the engines for that drone. And those drones were used for target practice for the World War II pilots. And so that's essentially where the knowledge got started. The imagery that drones use was started with the space program and the very first satellites going up in the military and the scientists wanting to see what the Earth looked like from space. One of the very first multispectral sensors that got sent up was at the insistence upon a woman scientist at NASA who insisted that we put up a multispectral sensor, and she got one of those on the early Landsat platforms in space. And the second that the first images came in, everybody said, I knew it, it was my idea, and just went from there. So from drones, in the mid 1990s, people started to try and get these a little bit better than hovercraft or helicopter type instruments from the radio controlled airplanes to be a little bit more stable, where you could fly them and hover and take pictures and all that sort of thing. So the modern drone movement with the quadcopters and that sort of thing started in the mid 1990s with some innovators and some inventors and some engineers trying to make a better helicopter, really, so it wouldn't crash and it was easier to fly. And so now we have basically anything you can think of, FPV and racing drones and fixed wing and all that sort of thing. So it's come a long way.
Okay. How has Arbor Drone contributed to advancements in this field? And can you provide an example of a successful project?
Oh boy. I'd like to think it has. So what we're doing now, let me say a successful project would have been, we had a contract with the City and County of Denver to assess the emerald ash borer potential invasion from Boulder County. And so we went out and looked at all the trees and the ash trees on the northwest part of town, which is Boulder's northwest of Denver. And so we went out and looked and assessed those and tried to get a handle on ash tree health from the air and where's likely ingress opportunities for the emerald ash borer. And at the time we were working on that and making those flights. Interestingly, a landscape architect had driven in from Boulder that day, and it looked like he had an emerald ash borer hitchhiker on his car, and so the forestry department went out and and climbed a couple trees and did some draw knife work and tried to see if they could find any in the trees nearby, and they weren't able to. But at any rate, we looked at the Denver urban forest in that neighborhood for several years, and were able to go so far as identify which ash trees had been treated and injected, and so we were able to make some advances with that. And so now what we're doing is this will probably be our last year of flying, but we're doing a lot of post-fire restoration work, especially in the LNU and the CZU complex fires in Northern California, looking at the ability of the oaks to regenerate post-fire.
Oh, okay. All right. So, is there anything besides the forest fires and invasive species, whether it's insects or plants, any other type of projects that you're doing?
Yeah,
with drones, that would be kind of wow.
Yeah. Sorry. Wow. Yeah. What we're doing.
Well, everything's wow, but
yeah.
I mean,
right. Yeah. So, what I'm working on now is probably next week I'll fly again. It depends upon the weather and the low clouds, but we're working on a set of algorithms that I have that look at tree health. And so just taking a drone, flying anywhere over any kind of forest or woodland, and being able to assess tree health that way. And it's harder than it looks. It seems like either family genus, there's a break in there somewhere where you use a particular algorithm for forest health that may work in general over a large area with a number of species, some species or genera that works, and sometimes it doesn't. And so as long as you know, for example, here in this area, we've got all kinds of different things from eucalyptus to different conifers and that sort of thing. So, for example, eucalyptus has a different reflectance profile because it's got a lot of red in its leaves, and so it'll reflect a little bit more red. And then some eucalyptus absorb a little bit more red, and then so they mask their ability for chlorophyll A to express itself in the red end of the spectrum. And so it takes different algorithms depending upon what genus or species you're looking at to pull out plant health. And so the goal this summer is to see if I can nail down a particular algorithm that can get maybe 80% of the tree species, including
that'd be great.
Yeah, including eucalyptus to give us an idea of tree health across the urban forest landscape. Also, it looks like I don't have the signatures on this yet, but it looks like I'll be looking for a different pest this year, Polyphagus shothole borer. And so that's moved up from Southern California into Northern California here into the Bay Area. So it looks like I'll be looking for that as well. So that'll be a new pest. I'm not sure I'll be able to pull that out of the trees that it likes to eat, but we'll see how that goes and see if we can find that also.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're developing not necessarily a new technology, but a new program that drones can use to gauge plant health before you put feet on the ground, so to speak.
Yeah, so it's aerial remote sensing, and so we're using the data that come out of the sensors that are on board, whatever flying aircraft there is, and take those data and pull those data apart and redo those data to use that information for plant health.
Okay. All right. What new drone technologies or features are you most excited about?
I think it depends upon exactly what you're looking for, but for the boots on the ground sort of people who may be, either looking at trees in the urban area or in the wildland urban interface or whatever, I think the drones that are out now that have the proximity sensors to them, the DJI type aircraft or the any of the few other aircraft out there that they've got the proximity sensors, so you don't fly directly into a tree. It may not see a tiny little branch, but it'll see the rest of the tree. Those things help a lot, and especially in a forest or in a woodland, those things can really help prevent a crash. As long as there's more than just one tiny little branch that's finger size. Anything bigger than that, it can see. I think that helps a lot. The visual sensors that are out now are several of them are better than cell phone imagery, and so 20 megapixel sensors. Some are 48 megapixel sensors. Some of them have decent electronic zoom on them, that sort of thing. So a couple of the new aircraft that are out now have got 10 times zoom that work pretty well. It's fairly good, better than a cell phone camera, and so those can be particularly useful when you're scanning one tree or multiple trees.
Okay. When you started, were drones being mainly used for or in forestries to monitor tree health and etc., or did you find using them more in an urban environment?
For me, it's always been urban. I like to think I'm an urban ecologist type, urban forester, and so the wildland stuff I like because I think it's an interesting problem. The wildland urban interface is an interesting problem that our society and other societies have as more people get on the earth and they move out into the woods. There's with climate change, there's more of a danger of fire, and so we have to take that into account. And so I'm a climate change guy, and I'm speaking in Atlanta at ISA on climate change, and so that's I've been doing that for longer than I've been doing forestry. So that's really what I care about. And so in the urban environment, climate change with the urban heat island is the thing that I really care about there. So when I started with the drones, it was mostly agriculture, and there was some forestry done, but it was harder back then to have a decent drone with a decent sensor on it and fly that in a way where you could, get more than 50 hectares worth of data in a day and do something with it. And now with the computing power the way it is now, and it's made that a lot easier. So now we have hyperspectral sensors that we can put on drones and take that couple terabytes worth of data and actually store it on a drone and then download it and do something with it in a day or 2 days, and that's helped a lot. Did I answer your question? Was that
okay?
Is that what you wanted?
Yeah. When with my experience, I've used my drones in ag, so that's why I sort of saw this for agriculture, at least saw this coming many years ago, and decided I would take the leap. So I typically use mine for ag versus forestry. So I was just curious where you saw the beginning, the initial use of drones past the military, whether it was urban or agriculture. So how do you foresee these technologies impacting forest conservation and management practices?
Yeah, it's real interesting. So, of course, I'm in the United States. It's different in different countries there's countries that allow some pilots and some companies to fly beyond visual line of sight, and we can't do that yet in many parts of North America. And so that's an impediment. And once that impediment is gone, for whatever reason, it's still here, and we haven't, it's probably a different podcast to talk about why we can't fly beyond visual line of sight yet. But where I see it going is a number of different things, and they're all wrapped around fixed wing and being able to fly fixed wing aircraft. They've got a longer range. They can cover more area. And so when you're thinking about, in my view, when you're thinking about cities or even in the wildland urban interface, a couple 100 acres or 100 hectares, that sort of thing. When you're looking at that sort of area, you really want a fixed wing. And so the fixed wings that are out there now, perfectly capable. The Trinity fixed wings with the VTOL, they take off, vertical takeoff, and then they go and they can fly for an hour, cover 500 acres, 250 hectares or so. I think that's really where it's going, and their payload is about a kilogram or so, which is a real nice sensor with multiple filters on it and multiple lenses, that sort of thing. So in the forestry aspect, now that we've, in some places that they're able to fly, you see the papers that are coming out now, the different fixed wings that are being used to fly, to test researchers' ideas with respect to canopy closure or individual tree canopies and the health of individual trees. And so a pest doesn't spread across a tree farm or that sort of thing. That's where it's going right now. And so they're able to, pick apart those individual trees, either using photogrammetry or LiDAR. A lot cheaper to do it photogrammetry. And so you're starting to see the cost-effective of photogrammetric techniques, not using LiDAR, of the individual canopies and the individual tree health, and across a wider scale. So that's where that's going, I think. With the wildland urban interface work in the North America, you're able to see you're able to see at a much finer scale, much finer detail, the individual plants that may be problematic for fire suppression or fire control, or fire avoidance, fire mitigation type techniques for landscaping, to come up closer to structures and that sort of thing. So you're starting to see the papers come out with both visual and with spectral imagery, starting to tease apart those problems and come up with solutions rapidly. That maybe are fine with a university budget, but none of us have university budgets. And so how do we do lower cost techniques to try and tease out these data to make them usable for clients?
So that the urban and forestry area, utilizing this technology, the advancements in technology, would make it easier to possibly prevent forest fires.
I think so.
Correct?
Yeah, I think as long as as long as you get people on the ground that are willing to thin their trees and clear some of that the flammable material leading up to things that can ladder up into the canopy and then start blowing over, that sort of thing. So it's all about the initial having the ability to describe and show the problem. And so using a fixed wing or even a rotor wing aircraft, say you've got 30 or 40 acres, you can fly that in less than an hour, and then show your client concrete things out of this aerial mapping and some oblique photographs of exactly what you're thinking about, and having that ability for the client to visualize exactly what it is, a before and after. That's a good technology that's going to be a lot more widely available once more people can fly their drones.
So do you expect, let's say in the next 5 years, that's going to be a standard practice of forest management professionals, as to evaluate those areas between the forestry and urban development to cut down on forest fires? Because, we typically, and I'm in North America, typically concern or hear about forest fires starting in forests. And then, when they head into the urban environment, then, it's a big issue. You see it all over the news. While it has always been a big issue, but do you think that the fixed wing, more information that we can get from drones, do you think that's going to be a tool in a forest toolbox to monitor, as a way of monitoring those areas before putting boots on the ground to prevent a problem?
Yes, and I think it's important at this point that we talk about scale. And so the drone scale is generally, I would say, no more than 100 to 200 acres or 50 to 100 hectares. Before you're just running out of time and the ability of a regular rotor wing drone to image an area. Fixed wing drone, you can do more, like anywhere from 500, 600, 700 acres, 350 hectares a day during the best light with a fixed wing drone. And so as long as you can get the clearance to fly a fixed wing drone, out a mile, 2 miles, that sort of thing, beyond visual line of sight, as soon as we can get that, 5 years ago, right? as soon as we can get that going, you can take any of the aircraft that are out there now, any of the fixed wing drones that are out there now, and expand your scale. So regular rotor wing drone, 100 acres, 200 acres, 100 hectares. Fixed wing drone, 500 acres, 250 hectares. Now, then you go up to the aircraft, piloted aircraft. You can cover hundreds of miles a day on there. So it's the scale of the remote sensing that you're looking at. And then so once you can get that going, and you can get regular flights, you need sensors, right? So you have to have sensors to put on these aircraft. And once you get those sensors out there, wherever the money comes from, once you can get those going up, then you can get that. And so what I'm working for is, so from the utility vegetation management, and so from the fire prevention and assessment management point of view, is being able to take the sensors, fly those out, have 1,000 hectares, and then be able to use the my software to be able to assess plant health and to get a better idea of fire risk or maintenance needs at that time. And so that it's all about scale and being able to fly at scale. And so being the laws allowing drones or aircraft drones, it's the law being able to fly beyond visual line of sight. For aircraft, you have to have the sensor, right? And so it's just a matter of making specs for the sensor and getting the sensor and getting on an aircraft and flying it. Long answer,
Okay.
And a little bit of a rambling answer, but it's a not quite been solved yet. And so we have to think about at what scale we want to operate. And then we can solve that problem depending upon the scale.
Okay. Are some cities hiring drone operators or hiring you to evaluate fire risk of potential areas that they want to develop? If a new subdivision wants to come in.
The real clue, the short answer is no. Every once in a while you get a scattered one here and there. And the short answer for the no is because generally in the wildland urban interface out here in the West, those are rural areas and they just don't have that kind of money. And so there has to be grant money out there somewhere, and somebody has to make that grant program available. The workaround right now is the NAPE imagery and some other national imagery, or even people hiring somebody to look at Google Earth just to try and get their minds around the data on Google Earth Engine. And so it's all about money. And so when you're talking about urban forestry, it's the budget that the city has for the taxation. In the rural areas, is it a rural landowner, who isn't ready to log their property yet, but maybe in 15 years they are, and that's their retirement, that sort of thing. So because of the patchwork ownership of land across the Western United States, it makes it really difficult to for a rural area to number one, get their minds around it, get their, have some money to look at it, and then coordinate all the different landowners out there. So if it were an easy problem to solve, we wouldn't have some of these issues I think that we have right now. And it's like herding cats, really, to try and to try and get your mind around the issues of wildland urban interface. And I bring that up because that's where a lot of the thinning needs to go. But we've got structures and second homes and first homes in there, and those burns get out of control, and they can burn somebody's home down, and then you're in trouble. And so I know of an instance that some years ago now, it was up in Trinity County in California, and they were doing some controlled burns near the town of Weaverville, and the sparks flew into some dead. We have this weed out here called yellow star thistle, and the sparks flew into the star thistle and caught and burned down part of the high school. Oh my gosh. Part of I know, and the wind just picked up, and it's that kind of thing. And so when you've got so many homes in a wildland urban interface, it makes it hard to manage with fire. And so the Forest Service out here, Cal Fire, everyone's trying to wrap their minds around carbon sequestration and keeping trees on the land for water storage, that sort of thing, and then thinning enough to keep the fire suppression going. And it's a giant effort. And so again, we bring in the drones at the smaller scale, at the landowner scale, right, and then the fixed wing, at the county scale, and then the aircraft, goes from the county, all the way to the state. And then so now you're looking at aerial remote sensing from space, and there's some satellites that are out there now that've got 30 centimeter resolution, and the multispectral resolution's a meter, which is pretty good. Yeah, so 1 meter resolution for space is good. Yeah. Go ahead.
So would you see down the road, maybe in the next 10 years, having the land evaluated with a drone would be commonplace, like soil percolation, a soil percolation test? If you wanted to build a subdivision, it must pass a soil percolation, in my area at least, has to pass a soil percolation test. So do you think let's say the next 10 years, that drone evaluation of the fire risk and the health of the plant material and et cetera is just going to become commonplace as far as urban development?
I do, and it's all dependent upon sensor development. And so that's the thing that I think the whole in what we have is the sensor development right now. And I know it's being worked on. I know there's people and companies out there that have their own sensors, or developing their sensors, or getting their minds wrapped around how to put a sensor on the bottom of something, a bigger, heavier sensor, like a kilogram plus payload. And so once those are more commonplace, the answer will be yes. And so hopefully in 10 years that development will go forward. It's hard to predict where the money is going to go, and that sort of thing. But I think the climate change is getting worse, so we're starting to see worse fires. And already in northern BC and Alberta, those fires overwintered, and they've sparked up again. And so I think once you start seeing, more instances of this, unfortunately, there'll be a little bit more impetus for fire protection and just plant health in general. When you're looking at new electricity generation, either by wind or solar, from distant places, like people want to do, instead of putting it on your roof, they want to have generation in distant places, and then carry that power, to where the people are. You've got to have transmission line clearance. And so there's a lot of companies that make a lot of money doing transmission line clearance. And so once the drones can fly beyond visual line of sight, there'll be a greater need for transmission line maintenance and clearance as well. And so that'll be part of it. And so once you can get all that working together and then have that market out there, then you can develop the sensors to do urban development, suburban development, fire mitigation, that sort of thing, climate change. So it'd be easier to quantify canopy cover, although we can do that pretty well from space right now. But the quantification of canopy cover for canopy cover goals, that sort of thing. I think 10 years is probably a pretty easy goal to meet.
Okay. What advice do you have for forestry professionals to prepare for these technology advancements?
I think not everybody can be a pilot. It's a mindset, and so finding enough, being open to finding enough pilots, and or maybe having some of your staff, have whatever be funded for half-time pilot work, and then do whatever they need to do for the other half-time. And so being open to that. So being open to also having people that can do technology either pretty well. Let me do a little digression to come back, but pretty soon we won't need to have people that can code in R or in Python or in C+ or something like that. You'll be able to have a large language model like ChatGPT or something do that for you, and anyone will be able to do that within probably 3 years. And so I'll probably, I don't want to say too much, but I'll start doing presentations next year. My presentation courses for next year will include that you don't need to do the formal courses now. You just be able to do natural language programming that way. And so that's one of the things that I see. And so having staff, bringing this back around to your question, having staff that are able to take large language models like the ChatGPT or the Copilot or whatever you want to call it, and to be able to manipulate that and make prompts to get outputs that other staff needs or that the department needs. And so being open to hire those people, being able to have your staff be able to interact with those people that may not be in the field all day, and not resent those people for not being out with boots on the ground and doing what it takes, and being able to find them, and being able to articulate to a local university or something to allow forestry staff or urban forestry or horticulture or whatever staff being able to sit in on some of these GIS or classes like that, to be able to get those skills. And so maybe have the ability from somebody to say like Stephen F. Austin University, which is really good with this technology. I'm just using them as an example, just to say, here's a 10-hour certificate for programming or for technology or something like that, and able to take that forward and recognizable on a resume to do that sort of thing. So the software, post-processing, image manipulation, data processing, that sort of thing is going to be more important. And so how can you work that staff requirement, into the people that you hire, because you're going to have nerds. And so, what's your staff mix in between a nerd and all your other people on the ground, right? And so how can we get our boots on the ground people integrated with the one or two nerds that we need, and keep them busy all the time is going to be the challenge, I think, here coming up in the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay. What are the key considerations when integrating drone technology into forestry operations?
So you have to be able to think about scale. And so the scale, I like to talk about it, 25 acres and then 250 acres and then 2,500 acres, right? And so the fixed wing drone is a 25 or I'm sorry, the rotor wing drone is the 25, the fixed wing is the 250, and then the aircraft is the 2500. And then anyone can do satellite, but it's the resolution that you need. So the key considerations are scale, and then computing power, and having somebody able to manipulate sensor data. And so if you've got a multispectral sensor, how many bands are there? What do those bands mean? So do you have a sensor without a blue band? So what's your, so now you've got a serious restriction. If you just got a 4-band, sensor on your fixed wing drone, you got serious restrictions on what kind of data you can analyze without blue, right? And so now, what kind of sensor am I looking at? What are those bands? What does blue tell me? What does this green wavelength give me? Now, what are my red wavelengths, right? So now I've got chlorophyll A in the red wavelength, and is it of a good enough resolution, and can I crunch data well enough, and maybe even get fluorescence out of a particular band, out of red, so I can see better chlorophyll activity in the red. How many red edge bands do I have to see where the drop off is for the plant health, that sort of thing. So getting your mind around what the sensors do, right? So sensors from space are really useful, but who's going to be able to? Can you find a firm somewhere that can crunch that data for you? Now, do you have a staffer that says, I need to have plant health? Okay, well, here it is. Here's our plant health. And then does the staffer say, oh, this doesn't make any sense. I need you to do this, need you to do that. It's not what I'm looking for. This image is saturated right here. You use the wrong vegetation index. I need you to, use a different vegetation index to find chlorophyll because it's saturated. It's that kind of thing. So how do you get staff that's able to interpret the data for some GIS nerd who doesn't know anything about trees or plants, right? And so that's going to be a key consideration moving on here. And so once you have, let's say the a horticulture degree or a forestry degree or something like that, and you've got your botany and your biology, and you understand the Krebs cycle and how chlorophyll works, once you've got that set of knowledge, that it doesn't take you long to make that leap into what sensors do, and then you wrap your mind around, okay, I know my chlorophyll A and B work in these regions of the spectrum, and so I know I need to have data collected in these regions, and now this is a conifer, and so this has extra red reflected out of here, so this may not work as well, so I need to suppress this red band, that sort of stuff. So once you get your mind around that, and it really doesn't take long once you start looking at this stuff. But you have to have a GIS background. You have to be able to look at the Esri products or QGIS or something like that to be able to manipulate those data. But it's not much of a leap once you've got the botany background to step into there. And then so now, if you've got that botany background and that horticulture background, now you've got the skills to be able to go out and get a company that can just take all the data and do whatever you want, and you can get that data that makes sense. And that's the big thing, is how do I make the data make sense? And so, do these data do what I need to do? No, okay, I need you to do this for me instead, and use these bands and manipulate the bands in this way to give me the output that I need so the data makes sense. And that's a real big next step right there for people.
Okay. So what are the key considerations? Oh, I've talked about that one. Are there any other challenges that you foresee besides getting the nerds being able to wrap our mind around this new technology and interpreting the data and getting the sensors right so that the sensors are picking up on whatever information a person needs to answer a question? Do you see any other common challenges for forestry professionals besides what you've talked about?
For urban forestry professionals, go ahead.
Do you think maybe forestry discipline at the college level may need to change to sort of embrace this new technology, or at least make foresters familiar with the technology?
Um, Let me answer that in a couple parts. The first part is I think it was maybe 2 years ago in our arboriculture and urban forestry, I wrote a paper about that, of how to get people's mind wrapped around where you need to go. And especially at the university level, I've got a section in there to talk about that. And so just to expand upon that a little bit, I kind of hinted at it before. If you can offer a couple more certificates, like a GIS certificate or something that people can take going forward, or they've already got their degree, they want to come back and get a GIS certificate or a remote sensing certificate or whatever that certificate is. Yes, I do think that we need more of that. I also think that when you're, say, in a forestry department in a large, say, a top 50 city in North America or in Europe, again, having your mind open to somebody from remote sensing that's familiar with remote sensing, and integrating them either into your staff or having one of your staff able to speak to these nerds to get the information that you want out of there. And so how do they get that, from the university level or from a self-paced, any of these massive online courses at MOOC, you can get at least a decent familiarity with most of what we talked about from online courses, Coursera, that sort of thing. Even something like Khan Academy, you can get information out of there as well. And so having the ability to incentivize staff or give them time to learn about these things is important. Now, jumping off of that and going a little bit separately but related to what you said, having your staff have ability to go out and maybe having a couple hours a week, learn what a remote sensing output looks like. So here's a map, and here are the data. This is what they look like interpreted. Now go out in the field and now look at this tree. And so, this tree, and I still have training trees in Denver. This tree's got anthracnose. This is what anthracnose looks like. This is what drought stress looks like. Look at all the red reflected out of here. There's a ton of red in here. That's generally indicative of drought stress, especially in the oak genus, right? And so giving them the ability to go out and get that relationship from what it looks like from the air, down on the ground. I think that's another key component as well.
Okay. All right. So, well, thank you, Dan, for sharing your insights and expertise with us today. It's been a fascinating discussion on the role of drones in forestry and what the future holds. To our listeners, be sure to check out Arbor Drone LLC at arbordrone.net to learn more about their innovative work. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to Timber Talks for more episodes on the latest in forestry. Until next time, I'm Mindy, and this has been Timber Talks. So do you have any questions for me, Dan?
Nope. I'll just, the expectation is that on my website, I just, link to you guys when the recording comes out, and I'll put it on the Twitter and all that other stuff, right? Okay.
Well, I'm just the interviewer. I'm not the company. They just hired me because of my background to interview people. So, dang. So, I just have to clarify that. Some people think I did all this, and no, I'm glad to see it. We need more people in forestry and technology and a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. So you're flying ag right now? What kind of crops do you fly?
I have the very, very, I can't even tell you the model to be absolutely. I actually bought them I was doing a project with farmers because this is how long ago it was. They had to pay a drone operator, a huge drone come in. So I got my first drone to test out this idea I had. So I use it for myself personally on a property that I own. My goal was to create a wearable drone for farmers that when they were on their combines, if they saw a problem, they could let a drone go up in the air. Because they had remote sensing, most of them, on their combines. But they didn't quite go as well as what I had thought. But then the FFA got involved in, the licensing, and was going to require farming to be licensed and stuff. So I kind of backed off on that venue, and I just used my 3 drones. If I have a person that wants me to come out just as a friend, we'll bring them out. But they're just the really small. They were the very first ones, one step lower than the commercial size ones. So they were very basic, but it's been very many years ago since I bought a drone. But I saw the technology coming, and I'm when I was in college, it just seemed so unfair to me with the remote sensing and the GIS and stuff, that it was really putting small farmers out of business because they just couldn't compete for many reasons. But one was the technology. Yep. And so my goal was to try to even up the playing field, was what I wanted to do with the drone. So
big business doesn't want you to even up the playing field, though.
It took me a long time. I taught ag in Louisville, Kentucky, taught at a city school, and I've learned a lot. It's as much as I want to change the world and make it a better place and make it fair, I can't do it unless they're going to let me do it. I don't have a problem doing work, but you got to let me do it. And so I'm coming from a farming background, and the reason I went into ag against, there was only one other female when I graduated from Purdue in ag ed, and I wasn't deterred by that. But in the 70s, this kind of tells my age, they were auctioning, on the CBS News, they were auctioning off farmland. And there was this old farmer in coveralls and his wife. She's sitting in a rocking chair, and they're auctioning off their farmland because they couldn't pay the taxes. And I was like, at that time, education was going to solve all the problems. Well, that doesn't solve all the problems all the time. So I have a big chip on my shoulder with Monsanto. I teach some online gardening classes for some different companies, and I'm always trying to steer away from that topic, But anyway, make a long story short, that's why I never turned it into a business, because that wasn't my goal. My goal was to get drones and figure out a way that farmers, the small farmers, could kind of even up the playing field as far as using technology. Because I hate to see farmland. If it's a farmer to buy the farmland for production, I'm okay. But I just hate to see farmland get eaten up into subdivisions or strip malls or parking lots or whatever, because the small farmer didn't have the technology to compete. So,
yeah, that's one of the things.
But it takes a bigger person. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's okay. No, I'm definitely with you. You know, one of the things that my grad advisor was really keen on when we were in grad school was she was a land cover change modeler, and you could see in Washington State, you could see the big farms out here, and then the smaller farms, and the smaller parcels, and get down, and eventually what's the tipping point where, this is going to be a housing development, over here, that sort of thing. And you can really see it out here in California, boy. I mean, it's just so hard to be a small grower out here. Down in the valley floors, 2,000 acres is, some company owning all the orchards for 2,000 acres, and their office is in San Francisco on the 19th floor. And, they never see that field. And then, it's the same back there, and everyone's growing corn, right? Or canola, right? And that's all they're growing. And, it's how do you even grow your own food? Right. And so that just, I think you and I are on the same page. It just drives me crazy. And I thought drones would be, the thing where, you could have the small guy and the small gal, right? And fly the drone for your client, over their 20 acres or something like that. And it just doesn't pencil out for anybody. It's just so hard. The margins are so thin.
Right.
The margins are so thin that it's just, it's just brutal. It's brutal.
Right. And I just, like in Indiana, the governor raised property taxes on farmland, and it's $2,000 an acre now.
What?
I mean, if you own any sizable, I know several farmers that, were my dad's farm. His dad was my bus driver but he does quite well, but it doesn't take too many years at $2,000 an acre property taxes to not be doing well, and it was just like, my dad was like, I don't understand the motivation. I said, the motivation is to force the farmer to sell the land for a subdivision, and then you can earn more money per acre with the houses on the subdivision. And in building in the community I live now, but, we're going to okay a subdivision for 12 homes on 5 acres, or maybe more than that, on property that has 5 natural springs. And we know that, it's not going to pass the percolation test. So what we're going to do is we're going to put half basements in with sub pumps to pump the water away so you can have a house. It's just like, a woman I used to see at the library. She owned this guy that owned all this land was a farmer. His last name was Whitsitt. And she bought his house, and she didn't want anybody living behind her. And he said, nobody will ever build there because it's got 5 natural springs. They can't build there. And they built there. To me, it just doesn't make any sense. But I have grandchildren, and I want them to have rural environment and, not have to go to a park to see a tree. And, and I'm not the only person that feels that way. It's just trying to get enough momentum and power that people see what's going on and, take the stands, not under my watch. This isn't what we want for our community, or this isn't how we protect our farmland, or, all these other things. So, and you're right, global warming's getting worse, and it will continue to get worse. And we have no one to blame but ourselves. So, well, some of ourselves. Some of us have tried to stop it.
Yep.
But, it's a very complicated problem, unfortunately. Well, it's been nice talking to you, Dan.